Welcome to the Tarot Coven cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hello there, lovely listeners, and welcome to the Tarot Coven cast. I'm one of your hosts, Jasmine.
I'm Jekanovia.
And I'm Jessie.
And this time on the show, we have an amazing interview for you. We are so excited to be talking with Samara Kasai of Kasai Thrive. Samara is a tarot reader and teacher whose Instagram bio reads, "Ask me about using intuition to break oppressive systems." And we absolutely will be doing that. Welcome to the show, Samara. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for however many months it's been since we decided we'd do this.
Us too.
Yeah, same. I mean, we were so thrilled when you initially reached out about being on the show because we had honestly just started talking about maybe doing interviews in the future and what would that look like? Are we comfortable with doing that? And I think maybe a week later you reached out and we just took that as a sign that we were on the right track.
How does that feel? You're a sign from the universe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm honored to be a sign. Hopefully this will be the first of many, many more then.
I love that. I hope so too.
All right. Well, we're going to be diving into some of your specific offerings and all that kind of stuff. But first, we wanted to get to know you a little bit better. So we've got some icebreaker type questions to get started with. So the first one, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you found your way to tarot?
Sure. So as you already mentioned, I'm a tarot reader, tarot teacher, breathwork teacher. I sometimes will just say I'm a witch on the internet. Like if I meet someone and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a witch on the internet." And they're like, "What else do you do?" And I'm like, "No, that's all." that's the whole.
I love that.
And how I found my way to tarot, I have I guess a less traditional tarot story. I think a lot of people who are witches on the internet will say that they got their first deck as a gift when they were 12, and from then on they've always been reading tarot their whole lives. And for me, I really fell into it when I was in a really dark place in my life. So I was just kind of realizing I needed to leave an abusive relationship and was looking for a way to navigate that without feeling like everyone in my life was consistently responsible for telling me what to do, because I think that was how I had gotten into the abusive relationship in the first place, was thinking about what other people would want from me. And so I really needed a way to connect to my higher self and my inner guidance. And I just stumbled upon people reading tarot on YouTube, and those messages resonated so strongly for me that I figured why don't I just buy a deck off of the internet for probably $20 or something and just see how it goes for myself. And it's been love at first sight ever since.
Wow. What a story.
Beautiful.
I always feel like tarot chooses you. It's a very similar situation for me. I, for years was do not touch tarot cards. They are of the devil. And I remember the moment. I remember where I was, and it was like, what the hell? I'm going to get a deck. And after that, it was just a language that I had known before. It just kind of opened up. And I love that I think it's just, the readers have a connection like that so often. Yeah, that being said, as you've worked through the tarot, do you have a card that you particularly align with? And maybe if you do now, has it changed from maybe the beginning, or any favorites that come to mind?
Well, I was thinking about my favorite card, and right now it's actually the Eight of Swords. That card has been coming up in my readings all the time, no matter what I'm asking, the Eight of Swords will come out. And to me, it's really been speaking about, because the deck that I have, I use a Modern Witch right now, and most, I guess, Eight of Swords cards, the person has their blindfold on and they're all tied up and everything, and they can't really do much. And it's been encouraging me to think about what agency I do have, even if the eyes on my face can't see a lot of possibility. and really pushing me, kind of like, I guess what my Instagram bio says, to like think about how I can more intuitively move through the world and move through like creating possibility where I don't really see it. And so it's been just like a really empowering and beautiful relationship that I've been building with this card. And it definitely always hasn't been this way. I think the Eight of Swords used to speak to me. It used to scare me, honestly, because I was like, I don't want to be that person that's like trapped and can't do anything. But one day I just heard the question, like, what can you still do, like blindfolded and with your hands tied up? Like, you can channel, you can share from your heart, you can connect to your higher self. And like, ever since that, I've just had such a beautiful way to look at that card. So that's definitely my favorite card. And yeah, it's changed. That really just came maybe a few months ago. And until then, I think my favorite card was probably like just be very basic about it. Like I think my favorite card was the Strength card because I'm a double Leo and I just always felt super called to identify with the Strength card.
Yeah. Well, first, I'd just like to say I love your take on the Eight of Swords. So often, I think people talk about how, which isn't wrong either, but just talking about how you can get out of that. And I love that you're bringing it back to, well, what can I still do in that moment, though? So that's just a really interesting reframe. I really enjoy that. Now, this is going to derail a little bit from our questions, but you mentioned being a double Leo. What's your big three? How does the double Leo fit in?
So I'm a Leo sun and moon, and I'm a Cancer rising.
Oh, what a combo.
Leo moons unite.
Yeah. Love it.
Very nice. Well, thank you for the answer too. And I will say just the vision of tuning in and how when you are blindfolded or you at least remove the distractions, that is when we can be the most in alignment. And a beautiful thought on the Eight of Swords. So that's what came to mind for me. And yeah, I love that that's your card right now.
Yeah, I love the whole idea of you just feeling your way through it. Because I mean, that is the card. You're feeling through it. So gorgeous. So I have a question for you. What are your other favorite practices? So like astrology or Reiki, writing, anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm a breathwork practitioner, and I actually, this is funny. I recently wrote out a list of like all the tools that actually help me connect rather than like thinking about what I see other people doing. And so the tools that I wrote down were breathwork for sure. That like really helps me a couple times a week. Reading tarot, of course. Writing, like stream of consciousness writing, has super helped me just to like see, especially if I'm trying to like connect more with my shadow self, like letting myself actually like visibly see all the thoughts that go through my head without judging them or trying to change them, has super helped. And then I've been doing yin yoga for like years, and I never really considered that like a spiritual practice. Like I just really wanted to be flexible, honestly. I was like, those people look so cool. But
That's fair.
More recently, it's become just a time to sit with myself and to think about the ways in which like my emotions are sitting in my body and how can I actually start to like create that space to move through them. So that recently made it onto the list too.
I love yin. And true yoga isn't so much about pounding out as many asanas and positions as you can, right? I think for a while there, that was what we thought of when we thought of yoga, whereas yin practice, for anyone who's not familiar, it's really just, you might only have 5 poses in the whole class and you're holding for maybe 5+ minutes at a time. And so it really gets deep into the posture where it ends up being very much a meditative movement, and so therapeutic for the body, with the breath work too. And so Samara, I always talk about my Ayurvedic studies and how I bring that in, and breathwork is a big part of that as well. And it is so healing, especially when our nervous systems are completely assaulted every minute of the day by so much coming in, that it's important for people, especially if they're feeling disconnected from their bodies, right, to ground with practices like the yin and breath work. So magical. Love that.
Yeah. And we'd definitely like to talk more about the breath work a little bit later on for sure. So
Actually, I just have a quick question. Now, you mentioned stream of consciousness writing. Is that similar to like automatic writing and channeling, or is that a different practice?
So I see them differently. When I'm automatic writing, I will like ground, set intentions to connect with a particular spirit that like isn't within me. Like it'll like it's more of like channeling, as you were saying, but like channeling through an external entity. At least that's how I practice it. And with the stream of consciousness, it's really been a way for me to connect to my shadow self. So like what is within me that I am not like actually trying to look at or creating space to look at, and how can I just like let my mind, like, to be honest, to give you an example, this really came out of like a lot of problems I was having with my current partner, and like he knows about this, so like it's fine. But I just like really wanted to yell at him, and I was like, I don't think yelling at him is going to be productive, but I do need something that will like allow me to like vent effectively. And so it grew out of just like, I need to have these thoughts and I need to get these thoughts out of me, and like how can I do that in a way that's like safe and still sustainable for everyone around me.
I am taking notes. Yeah.
I think I found a new practice.
Right? I mean, I was right there with you, Samara, where I was like, I want to yell, but maybe that's not cool.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I actually assigned it to, I've been assigning it to clients as like the anger journal.
Yeah.
Like just like if it comes out that they're just like moving through a really intense period where they're having a lot of thoughts and they don't know how to move through the thoughts without like causing destruction in their lives. And so we've been calling it the anger journal, and just having them like create a space in their day to just like be angry on a piece of paper every day. And it's really been helping people just like clear those emotions in a safe and productive way.
I think there's a whole lot of people right now who would benefit from doing that practice.
Hi, that's me.
With ourselves
it's
included,
me.
But everyone in the world right now.
Yeah. I got my hand up.
Yeah. That's such a fantastic idea, honestly, because I try practices like this. I'm always editing myself as I go, though. But I think if I were to tap into that anger part, there would be less of a need to feel like I need to edit myself, because that's just such a, well, I don't know. It's a natural emotion for me. But anyways, like, I just think that might come a little easier, and it might actually be a good outlet. So thank you.
Coven homework assignment.
Yeah, big time. All right. Well, you did say that you were a witch on the internet. So I know that you are into magic and making magic in your own life, but what does magic mean to you?
So my favorite definition of magic comes from, well, I heard it from Carolyn Elliott. I don't actually know who said it to begin with, but it's that magic is actively participating in synchronicity. So
Ooh.
For me, that really just looks like being able to actually like make meaning out of mundane things and allow things to, like how you all were saying, like me reaching out to you was like a sign from the universe, like being able to actively see that you are being guided and led and protected, even in like the most mundane interactions, you know?
Absolutely. I think we talk about that, or, a similar concept a lot on the show, where actually, wasn't it just on the premiere where we were saying people always look for the supernatural magic, but it's about looking for all those little things throughout each and every day. So,
yes.
All right.
Yes. All right. Well, you have diverse interests, this we know. So we're curious to maybe what you're watching right now, or maybe it's a show that you love, maybe it's a film that has inspired you, maybe both, but anything come to mind?
So right now I am like binging Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that's just like a product of the season I'm in. I think I just really need to have like very wholesome but lightly spiritual content that like makes me think about the world but is not about this world that we live in now.
Yeah.
And so I'll like fall into those like fantasy children's shows when I'm just like, I need to not numb, but like be someplace else while still connecting spiritually or feeling like I'm feeding that part of myself.
For some reason, like that concept or that show itself kind of gives me Leo vibes too, like just the inner child and like wanting to connect or even escape in that way a little bit too.
That makes sense. And I think given that it's so focused on like channeling the power of like your past lives into the impact that you are making right now. And for me, it's been really powerful. I can't tell if this is like a Leo thing or just like a Samara thing, but for me, it's been really powerful as a reminder that like the work that I'm doing now, I have been preparing for it like in multiple lifetimes, the same way that like the avatar is like something that incarnates over and over and over again and gets stronger every time. So like at this point, I am the most prepared I would ever be for like what is on my plate right now.
Ooh, that's so powerful. I love that.
Ooh, I have a follow-up question then. So how do you see your avatar, one of your avatars? Maybe describe one of your avatars to us.
Ooh. Okay, I have a follow-up question. So when you say like one of your avatars, like what are you referring to?
Yeah, like if you can think of an avatar that would make sense for you where you're at, or one that you just identify with, how would that look? This is a very tricky question, but it's funny. So this last weekend, through a workshop conversation I was doing, we were talking about the Hindu gods and all the avatars that they take on, and specifically Shiva, who is, I mean, they have hundreds of avatars, right? And I was like, I can get on board with this. It's almost like drag, like which person do I want to be today, right? That makes sense. But I was like in the world of mysticism or fantasy, or how does that look for you?
Ooh, I love that. I really like the idea of thinking about like what persona I'm leaning into at a given time. I think I've been learning a lot more about like ancient Egyptian spirituality right now. And ideally, I would like to be moving more into like a Hathor space, like being very kind of nurturing, giving, but having very strong boundaries and feeling like I can draw a clear distinction between like where I need to be strong and firm and like where I can soften and like provide. And so that's where I'm trying to get. I don't think I'm there now. I think I am still very much in the like, either I'm being very harsh and like being very mean to people, or I am like the softening really has to be earned with me a lot in my day-to-day life. And so, and I don't think that comes through a lot in like all the Kasai Thrive stuff, which is crazy to me that like no one knows that. But in my personal life, I think the softening has to be earned. And I'm trying to learn how to be confident enough in my ability to uphold my boundaries where I can like lead with the softness and then know when to like turn the boundaries on and off in a more gentle way.
Yes, because that requires a lot of vulnerability, which, you know, for anyone who's been in situations where there's a lot of mistrust or that trust has been taken advantage of, it's hard to lead with that. So I love that you're recognizing that it's something that you're working on, as we all are.
Yeah, that's some great transparency.
Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, no, I love that question. That was awesome.
I would have had to think about that for hours before I could answer that. I really would have.
Well, and it's like, yeah, what do you feel like today? It changes, it could change. And I guess that's the more we can see ourselves as this collage of, you know, all of the experiences and the gifts that we have. I think, you know, maybe this goes into some other topics that we talk about, but, you know, society, I think, programs us to align with labels. And, you know, I'm a mom, I'm a whatever, I work at this place, I do yoga. And it's like, those are labels. So we talk in this workshop that I'm doing, it's like, well, who are you? You know, and really it's like, I'm stressed out sometimes, but I'm also deeply loving, and I'm neurotic, but I'm creative. And so we are all of these things. And so to give people the freedom to acknowledge that this is a mix, and that's the beauty of who you are. It's the good and not even the bad, which is another label, but it's like the mix of all the things.
It's like, that was a really beautiful point, Jess, but it also made me think of, I think it's Hand in My Pocket by Alanis Morissette, where she's like all the contradictions of everything.
Yes.
90s represent.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I guess that kind of brings us into our next question. What's your favorite song right now or ever? Like, what's your theme song?
My favorite song. I recently reconnected with this song Angels by Chance the Rapper. And my spirits recently gave me the phrase like iPod divination, which for them is just like they like to tell me messages by giving me a song in my head. And like kind of what we were talking about with making meaning of the mundane, like if there's a song stuck in my head, maybe I should go listen to it and figure out like what's trying to come to me at that time.
Yes.
And one of the biggest issues I have is knowing when to like actually ask for help spiritually. And I don't know, like there's a lot that I could say about that, but one thing I've noticed is I take on a lot for like myself. Like I really expect that I have to be like doing everything all at once. And so my spirits have been like, you have to delegate to us, you have to delegate to us. And this song, Angels, is basically all about the fact that like you do have a whole team that's on your side, even if things look really chaotic and stressful. Like there are certain forces that can't touch you because you are being protected. And so it's really sweet to like receive those kinds of reminders. And that song has been in my mind a lot lately.
Ooh, I got some goosebumps.
Yeah. I have to go check that out. Thank you. I mean, these questions are fun. They seem really light, but come on, you learn a lot about a person by just, and you learn about these songs or stories or films that have inspired you. And again, our audience and for us, now we can go and check all these things out. So,
oh yeah, I've already been inspired so many times, and we are 20 minutes in, so that's great.
I'm having so much fun with all these questions.
Oh,
so thank you. I feel like icebreaker questions, like you were saying, like they don't get enough credit for like being really potent interview questions.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them.
Yay.
Well, now we're going to dive into the tough stuff then. So
yes.
Okay. I'm ready. I'm warmed up.
The real goodness here. No, it's all good. Yeah. I'm very impressed by the way you identify yourself, your message, kind of your dharma, right? Basically, you've outlined it very succinctly in your website and your profile, and talking about using tarot and intuition to break oppressive systems. Wow. Like just that sentence is so much. And I guess to start off with, like, what does that mean to someone who may not know about the combination of those words and what that means to you? Can you break that down or distill it for us a little bit?
That is the $1 million question. I think that is the question I'm trying to consistently like come to every single day and think about how I can be answering that question for people or guiding people through the exploration of that question. So thank you for asking. I love that. And the thing that's coming to mind to say now is that it really comes back to something that I said on the Living Open podcast, was that the same systems that teach us to oppress each other are the systems that teach us to suppress our intuition, the systems that lean us into this overly logical, overly kind of quantifiable world are the same kind of like energies and forces that teach us that, people who, for example, what I'm hearing now is like this sense of like natural selection within society, like trying to impose math and logic and reason onto human beings is what causes both oppression and the cutting off of our intuition. So how can we use that common ground to become more qualitative people that can see the generosity and the love and the goodness in each other, and also people who can connect to the other realm?
Yeah, that really brings to mind something that I have become more aware of as I've grown in my own spirituality. And it's just that so much that's out there is, we're taught to not trust ourselves. Someone else knows more.
Yeah.
Someone else knows better. And that is just a big fat fucking lie. So you have, we've all just been given the most innate gift of this intuitive knowing. And yes, so many things around us to distract and take away and basically make our lives so chaotic and crazy that we're not taking time to be quiet, stop, go within, and actually hear and listen to everything that we need to know. And so I love that that is the focus here, is identifying that, for people who, aren't aware that they know best. And I talk about it too with my body intelligence or emotional intelligence, like just listen to your body and how do you feel? I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even like going off of the whole body intelligence thing, it's like, if you actually made choices based on how you felt in your body, like how different would your life be and how differently would you treat other people? And like, what is the ripple effect of that for a society,
Yeah. I know this might sound like a little frivolous, but the only thing I have really learned to do fully based on that intuitive body feeling is get dressed. That's like the only thing that I've really been able to conquer in that way. And people, I mean, I think it's like a stereotype that women will pack a lot of clothes when they go on a trip, but I really overpack, and I constantly say I dress based on how I feel, and I change throughout the day constantly because I'm constantly changing the way I feel. So again, I know that sounds kind of superficial in a way, but that's, I don't know, just when you guys were talking about that, it really pinged that for me for some reason. So just wanted to add it there.
I love it. And like for me, when I was first practicing this, it was like eating, like what do I want to eat? And letting myself actually feel into what I want to eat, and then gradually like pushing it a little further and pushing a little further. So I think it does always start with like some kind of mundane day-to-day thing, and it moves out from there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's a few more things that you do, Jazz, that are based off. I mean, even the decks that you pull, or the decks that we decide to use for a daily practice, and it's kind of like, oh,
that's true.
Which deck? If you have multiple decks, or little things like that. But
I just feel like I guess getting dressed is the one thing that I'm fully like, okay, yeah, this is what I do. This is my intuitive system all over the place.
But I mean, that's how you're presenting yourself in the physical world, right? So it's not really superficial if you think about it.
Thank you.
It's how you're presenting yourself.
I've started wondering if it's a sun in the first house kind of thing. Like that's part of how I shine. I don't know, but.
My sun is also in the first house. That's so funny.
Oh, so you're a Placidus house system then? Okay, very nice.
Yeah, Leo sun in the first house.
Yeah,
it's a lot over here. It's a lot of a lot of being seen.
That's good. So in those intuitive gifts, things that you're, really leaning into the feeling of it, how do you use tarot in that way?
I have a habit, and especially since I just wrapped up the Tarot for Justice course and was like, I think in this for weeks. I have a habit of starting to ask my deck like more questions about like the world at large. So like, how can we move forward for the most just outcome, which grew out of like common questions for like the outcome that serves the highest good for everyone. I'll just tweak it and say like the most just outcome, like what is the most just outcome here? Things like that, thinking about how the deck can help us connect with the collective shadow of the world, and recognizing that the collective shadow is where all of these oppressive forces live. And so starting to get really candid with the deck about like why it is that certain things are upheld and how I personally can be a part of the solution. I've also been challenging my students to think about the ways in which, like with the moon in reverse, especially, how that could indicate that you are benefiting from a system of oppression, and you need to do a little bit more digging about how you can get those benefits elsewhere. So like if you really believe that unless this system oppresses other people, you somehow will not have something, how can you start to reframe and reimagine into a world where everyone has those benefits that you believe you're getting? So really just like pushing people in that way. And so in my course, we actually do like a card by card walkthrough of like how you can use this card to start thinking about your relationship with justice and with oppression.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's really, I mean, you are quantum, that's quantum level collective change, what you're describing, which is so powerful. And I think people don't realize that if, you know, almost like manifesting may not be the right word, but creating the change through conscious collective thought and changing DNA kind of energetic connections between people for that. It's powerful.
Would you give us an example of a card? I mean, I don't want you to, give away the whole course for free or anything, but could we walk through a particular card?
Sure. So let's see. The moon in reverse is always a good one, or the moon in general, but I'm also hearing the judgment card.
Okay.
So the way that I teach the judgment card is about moral relativity and thinking about the ways in which we've actually been hurt a lot in the world by seeing a small group of people impose their moral structure onto a large group of people, and encouraging you to ask yourself where you might be doing that in your own life and where you might be putting limitations on your ability to form close relationships or to love other people because they don't align with the moral code that you have set up for yourself.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for walking us through one. Yeah.
Of course. Thanks for asking. I love talking about these kinds of things.
Just going off of all of that, I was watching the interview you did with Holisticism, and something else I found super interesting about your work with tarot is this idea of decolonizing the tarot. So can we start with you maybe just also breaking that down a little bit for somebody who maybe is either new to the tarot or doesn't even really understand what decolonizing might be and how that would even apply to the tarot?
Yeah, for sure. So I teach a workshop called Decolonizing the Tarot, and in there I discuss kind of the ways in which tarot has perpetuated kind of colonial structures and has been a part of like the problem, and then also the ways in which tarot as a practice has been a victim of colonialism. So one of the things I talk about as far as like tarot being a part of the problem, or like the problem, but a part of an example of colonialism, I guess, within the tarot, is that the deck was created by white people. It was created in Europe for like the use of the European elite. And over time, the French basically, as they were colonizing Egypt, started to draw false connections between certain cards and Egyptian mysticism as a way to sell the cards as like these, objects that will tell your future. And it just became this whole capitalist exoticization. And I mean, it did very well, like here we are now, but that system really just was the product of the fact that people of color were being colonized and exoticized. And it's nice to see that like now people are using the tarot for good and are actually like using them as as positive forces in the world. But initially it started off as just a way to like exploit people and make money from it, or exploit culture and make money from it. And when I talk about tarot as kind of being a victim of colonialism or being subject to colonialism, I really talk about the ways in which we as a Christian dominant society just oppress and shove down anything that relates to connecting the spirit in a way that's not through the church or through a church sanctioned avenue. And so I'll talk about like specific parts of the Bible where divination is condemned, and talk through the ways in which even like working with clients who are skeptical of tarot, or the different DMs that I'll get when people will ask me like, how is tarot not evil? Like, explain to me why it's not the devil, and all of those things that are a product of the fact that with like the gold and the glory, we also had God going everywhere, and normalizing the idea of what it means to connect to spirit.
Do you answer all of those DMs?
I was answering all of them around the time when Decolonize the Tarot was coming out, because I was just very fired up on all of the material.
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
Now I'm like, at some point you will either figure this out or you won't, and I don't want to take on responsibility for that. So now I don't. But there was a time when I was really like in the comments of all my posts and like really trying to pull people along.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you can't, there's only so much free labor somebody can do.
Yeah.
Well, it's a really important viewpoint and historical.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that, may come from less than, I don't know, spiritual or positive beginnings, and yet they can evolve and grow into powerful tools that can do a lot of good in the world. So I just appreciate that you are bringing it to light, because honestly, it wasn't something that I had thought much about, especially when I first started using tarot. But it's important to just educate on all facets, and that's where, even people who are stuck in the box of tarot is of the devil because that's what they've been told, it's like, let's think outside of just this one viewpoint or something that, and why would you have been told that? And really, it just comes down to control and detachment, like making sure that you're not listening to yourself. Again, it's that full circle conversation about connecting to self.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess because it has evolved so much that we don't often think about its roots like that. So, but I think it's important for anybody that picks up a deck to understand where it came from.
Yeah. Well, one other thing that we want to talk about is just the removing gender from the tarot. And again, something that's everybody's becoming hopefully more aware of, and why that is so important. And so just a couple of thoughts from your perspective on that.
Yeah. So I identify as non-binary, so I don't identify as either male or female. And as I was coming to terms with like that reality, I was kind of forced to look at how I ascribe gender to things in my life, even if they don't explicitly have gender. And so with removing gender from the tarot, I guess I'll just go back to like the way that I do it in my course, because I like my course. But I encourage people to think about inner energy and outer energy rather than like a masculine or a feminine. I've also heard right brain, left brain, but I don't resonate with that because I always forget which one is right or left. But
same.
Yeah, I never know. But if a card like has an image that you were taught to read as female, I will just encourage people to think about the ways in which the scenario on the card is playing out in their inner world. So like the conversations they're having with themselves, or maybe the conversations they're having in their intimate circle, the experiences that maybe they don't tell everyone about, but that they know are there. And then if it's happening with a card that you're taught to read has a male on it, it'll just be encouraging you to think about how the way that you're presenting yourself, or the feedback that you're getting, like basically on that edge of, almost like the edge of your aura, if you think about it that way, like the interactions that you have with the world that is not you.
Ooh, yeah. And thinking on that soul level, right, where souls do not have gender. In fact, one of the things I read one time when people talk about soulmates, and it's like, souls don't mate. So that's not a thing.
Oh, wow.
And how
I've never heard that. That's so interesting.
As you open up, if you are more aware of the fact that you have been all genders, all sexual orientations, lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, soul work, right? Soul experiences, then just kind of removes the label and the importance. And So, and I love that you are saying the inner and the outer. That's a new way for me to think about that as well, because, you know, we, in our energetic bodies, we have a receiving and a giving. And a lot of times the receiving side is considered the feminine energy, and the giving is the masculine energy. I mean, this goes way back to the Vedic texts. And yes, it's a misalignment of the use of feminine and masculine. We've kind of taken that and been like, oh, feminine is female, a girl, and masculine is a boy. Whereas I think even back historically, it wasn't. And that's why even in Indian texts, like, it's so non-gendered, like they get it, right? Because it wasn't put in the boxes like we've done over the last couple of, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of years to specifically say, yeah, this is considered a feminine, or this is considered masculine. And so really thought-provoking stuff, and such important work right now.
Yeah, I definitely like the reframing of the inner and outer energies, and it, like, not seeing gender in the tarot is something I'm really working on lately too, like just deconstructing it. Like when I pull the Empress, okay, well, maybe on most decks it is, let's say, a quote unquote female facing or whatever figure, but also why does that just innately feel feminine to me? Where is that coming from, and how can I kind of break that down? And yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's a good challenge to give yourself. I mean, maybe right from the beginning when you're reading tarot, but certainly once you get a little bit in, start doing that, because gender's really boring when you get down to it. And when you break beyond it, I mean, it's just another way of tapping into that intuitive space as well with the deck, right? Like just getting rid of all that shit. And on that note, I wonder if you have any deck suggestions. I mean, really the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is the Wild Unknown, that just doesn't really have a lot of gender in the deck. But is there a deck you like that kind of steers clear, or at least does a better job?
Yes, I was actually just thinking about deck suggestions as you were talking. So synchronicity happening.
Yeah.
But I love the Modern Witch. Everyone on there is like someone who you would be taught to read as female. And so the whole, like the Emperor card has someone who you would consider a female on it. And so it just eliminates that whole thing. I also recommend to people the Next World Tarot. That's like my favorite deck. It's very imaginary. Like the whole concept of like the next world is like this world after we have moved through the oppressive systems that are creating the world we have now. Like, what does the next world look like? So it's a great deck for like any kind of anti-oppression imagining. And they play around a lot with the like gender presentations of the people on the cards. So like the queens will be any gender, the kings will be any gender. And it's just like, it really does feel like they're trying to convey a feeling to you rather than this is about a particular person. Another thing, Jesse, that your comment like helped me think about too was when you were relating to like the Vedic texts. And I've never read the Vedic text, but in my breathwork teacher training, we did a little bit of the Vedic text because I did like a pranayamic training, and we talked about balancing out the masculine and feminine energies like within yourself. And that really helped me to detach the idea that like these behaviors or attributes have to do with people who are assigned female at birth. It's like the work is trying to like have all things be balanced in your life. So that was super helpful, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And then the last thing about the gender was I figured it might be helpful for me to kind of like go into why I use inner and outer, because a lot of the times if you are coming from like a Vedic perspective, it might make more sense to think like, why not giving and receiving? And for me, inner and outer, I study the Hermetic arts a lot. And in the Hermetic arts, they teach that the feminine or female aspect is the shadow self, and the masculine is the, I guess, conscious self. And so when you think about like cards with people who are considered to be male, that will be kind of like what you're putting out into the world and how you present yourself to others, and like what conscious thoughts you have and how they're playing out in your life and what actions you're taking. And then the more feminine will be like, well, what's going on inside your head that maybe you don't want other people to know, or that you don't know about, and like what maybe you'll only tell a few people, more of the like shadowy side of yourself. So that's where that comes from, if people are interested in like looking more into that.
Very sun and moon.
Yeah, that's really cool to know.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's
moon,
all sun and moon energy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, where next?
Yeah, Jesse, I know you wanted to talk more about breathwork and Jekanovia. I know you wanted to, well, we all really want to chat about the anti-capitalist money stuff that you've got going on. That's fascinating. I did sign up for your email challenge, but I've only made it to day 1, and I did start doing the journal prompts, which is super great so far. So I would highly recommend. I mean, Samara, in your links on your Instagram, there's like a ton of resources. I recommend everyone go there. We will mention that again at the end of the show. But yeah, it's day 1 was already like, oof, okay, we're doing it.
There's so much.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was like, how can people get from like point A to point B in 3 days? And so it is a very dense like resource, but once people go all the way through it, I feel like they've actually like made tangible progress. So stick to it for sure.
I will. Yeah.
All right. I'll have to be right behind you, Jazz.
Yeah. Well, I signed up for your How to Love Money Without Feeling Like a Slimy Capitalist webinar. I mean, just the name of it, I was like, yep, that's me. So now, lovely listeners, these are my words. Samara is so much more eloquent. So definitely, keep that in mind. But basically, there's something that you mentioned, and it really hit something within me, and I've been really thinking about it actually ever since. And it was about this common belief that by having more than enough, or quote unquote too much money, it actually causes us to stray from who we are. That will change us into a capitalist asshole who doesn't care about justice or equality. And I mean, that's just not me. So that's always been one of my resistances to accepting abundance. I had no idea that this was such a common narrative that a lot of people hold. And I feel like there's some really good shadow work to be done there. So I was wondering if you can talk about that for a minute and shed some light maybe on where those beliefs may come from and how we can face that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, that's beautiful. And actually, that's a comment that I've gotten a lot since I gave the workshop on Monday, was like that specific piece of feeling like having above a certain amount of money, and for everyone it seems to be different, but like you have a number in your head and you feel like once you have more than that, you will change, you will lose some fundamental piece that makes you a good person. And that for me, I mean, where I think it comes from and where I've seen it with my clients a lot in one-on-one is we get shown a lot of really nasty images of people who have wealth. Like we get shown Jeff Bezos a lot. We get shown like Bernie. Well, if you follow Bernie on any kind of like social media platform, Bernie Sanders is always talking about the people who have been making a fuck ton of money during the pandemic, not paying their taxes, and like fucking everybody over. And so that tells us that like once we become more and more like those people, we will become less and less of ourselves. And for me, what's been really helpful is recognizing that like there is a distinction between being someone that is directly profiting off of making other people's lives worse, or that is being opportunistic about suffering, and someone who is genuinely trying to accumulate resources that are going to help them and help the people that they love and like extend out and to help a community. And I think it's like one of the sneakiest tricks of the world that we live in that teaches us that like, if you actually want to do good in the world, you should not pursue the resources that will allow you to do that more effectively. Those are my thoughts on that.
It's such an insidious belief too. It saturates everything. And I think it really affects a lot of our decisions, especially when it comes, towards our abundance and our self-love, self-care, because we feel guilty for wanting more or for wanting to feel better. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it really permeates this community too, like tarot readers, people who do spiritual work in general. Like there's a belief that you shouldn't be charging for quote unquote gifts from the universe, which they're gifts from the universe, but like you're still doing work. So
yeah, you're charging for your time, not your talent. And then
Right.
even people who maybe aren't in this community, because I know growing up, I was taught that work should not be fun. You should hate your job, because if you don't hate your job, then you don't deserve to get paid for it. So it's just weird how young it starts.
Right. Yeah. And I actually read a post earlier today. One of my friends is like creating a program for people who want to become full-time knitters. And I think that's like so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so lovely. And they posted on Instagram today actually about the myth that like if you actually make money doing something that you love, it's somehow greedy of you to feel like you should just be paid for having fun, or like, you know, you should be benefiting from something that comes so naturally to you. And I honestly think that, again, that comes back to this capitalist belief that like you have to contort yourself and become a worker, quote unquote, in order to be deserving of money. Like people were forced to do jobs that they did not want to do, and their traditional ways of supporting themselves. Like I think especially a lot with like before we had the specialization of labor that we have now, at the time when shamans were living in tribes, it was understood that the shaman would just be given food and would be given resources in order to live their life. At this point, if you're doing any kind of healing work, you still have to go to the grocery store. Like you still have to have money in order to sustain your life. And we haven't taken the fact that we do live in a society where people do get kind of, people want to carry in the mindset of no one should be exchanging money for spiritual work, but they don't want to like layer on top the fact that the people who do spiritual work still need to exchange money for things in order to like live a life. And the other thought I had about that, to go back to the like people had to work and were forced into jobs that they didn't want to do. A lot of the times I genuinely believe that like everyone has spiritual gifts from the universe. Everyone has things that they are naturally inclined to do. And under capitalism, you are taught that you have to abandon those, like certain things can only be hobbies and other things can be jobs. And so you don't consider that it's possible for you to make money doing the things that you're naturally inclined to do, unless for some reason you're naturally inclined to like make spreadsheets. But if not, then we don't really see reinforcement for the fact that it's okay to make money doing the things that like you're good at or capable at, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
1,000%. And what comes to mind is the artists, the farmers, like, you know, the jobs that are allowing us to live beautiful lives are often the ones that are least celebrated, acknowledged, and certainly given the proper exchange, which is just, you know, the way of the world at this time. I believe that we can move back to the awareness and just celebration of the beautiful jobs, the jobs that the work, it's not even a job. I even hate that term, but it's more of like the dharmic work that, you know, if someone is out there growing food, healthy, nutrient dense food for people, I mean, you're like, why aren't we supporting the people that are keeping us alive? You know, it's so backwards. You know, you cannot, spreadsheets will not keep us fed. Yeah, and it's very twisted, but I think we're just becoming more aware of how we've just followed along for so many years. I mean, my older girls who are they are in college right now, and I encourage them to go to college because it was just like, you know, this is an extension of an experience that you can grow into. We're able to do this, and they're artists. They're studying art, and they're like, this isn't a job. We can't do something with art. And I'm like, I don't really care about that. You need to be studying something that you love. That's the only degree. If you're gonna get a degree, get it in something that you're interested in that you love, and it will work itself out. But don't do what I did, which felt like you had to be in this, you know, I've got to get a business degree because this is what I need to do to get a job. It's just, you know, I wish somebody would have told me, you know what, you love plants. Like if I could go back and do it again, and who knows, maybe I will, but it's like, I love horticulture. I love gardening. Like I would have loved to have done that and made that my career. And so hopefully the young people or anyone who's deciding to step back into educating themselves, whether it's formally or just by, doing the work, get out there and learn. But it's like, yeah, do what lights you up. Tap into the gifts that you have, because really that's what should be monetized, celebrated. So I think we would all be much happier and more in tune if we would just ask ourselves what really lights us up. And if it's knitting, like you said, I just think that is amazing. If it's,
yeah, that's so cool.
Just making flower arrangements, if it's cooking beautiful meals,
Or I mean,
like all
if
of
it is spreadsheets,
yeah,
great.
there are
Right?
people who
Like,
love spreadsheets, right?
farmers could use
totally, which is
spreadsheets.
totally cool. Yeah.
But that is,
Yeah, Jaconovia, you do love a spreadsheet,
I
don't you?
geek out over a nice pretty spreadsheet.
Yeah, and fair enough, right? So, well, Jaconovia, did you have more questions about the anti-capitalist money stuff specifically, or should we just kind of move into the breathwork aspect of it?
No, actually, Samara moved right into exactly what my follow-up question was, so it's already been answered. So maybe we'll just talk about that breath work.
so I guess the question for you, Samara, is how have you made this connection as you've been studying breath work and mindfulness practices? When did you kind of just, put the two together, that there could be an assist and they could work together to heal?
Beautiful. Okay, so how do I want to, I'm trying to organize the thoughts in my head because it never looks linear, like while it's happening.
Yeah,
and so I'm trying to be like, okay, how did I get from A to B to C? But I guess to like speak very broadly, I am trained in a couple of breathwork styles. So I trained like in pranayama, like yogic breathing, and then I also trained in 2-part breath, which is a breath that's like specifically for accessing your repressed emotions. And as I started really working with the breath for your repressed emotions and thinking very deeply about like how I would like to actually live versus how capitalism has told me I want to live, it became kind of like this firework of feeling like all of my feelings about capitalism and actually locating them in my body and letting myself process and like see any memories that I needed to see about, my parents telling me you need to major in this or you won't get a job. Like the things that we've all been discussing, seeing how they've been kind of sitting in my body, causing me this underlying like seething sense of discomfort. And then using the pranayama breathing styles to then come back into my parasympathetic nervous system, bring myself down and like connect to the higher, more infinite part of me that can actually see a world where I'm not living in accordance with like what the dominant narrative says you have to do. And so honestly, I think that's the only reason I have a business is because I was taking myself through this process while I was like deeply dissatisfied with the way that I was making money before. And after just like doing this, like on nights and weekends, like breathing and journaling and all the things, it clicked for me after a really intense breathwork session when I was just like sitting there seeing like all these memories and like putting the pieces together and realizing that like, yeah, I've been like allowing my life to be this way, but it doesn't have to. And like, if I try hard enough, I can come up with a life that like doesn't look like this. So I've just been my own guinea pig here.
Yeah, what comes to mind,
so
I've been through a similar process and the 2-part that you just described brings to mind a Kriya breathwork session that I recently went through, and where it is 2-part, and it pulls you out of your body. And from the Ayurvedic side of it, they're trying to work through what's called samskaras, which is really just grooves, brain patterns that we have, I'm not this or I'm this. And it's all of those traumatic things that we hold within our bodies that just, you have to process through to work them out. So my question as a follow-up is, do you also feel, and I guess it's kind of leading, but do you feel that some of these traumatic things that are held within our selves, our physical selves, are also coming from past life trauma?
I mean, I do believe that they are. I think for me, one of the things that I've noticed for my own self is that it's like past life trauma, especially if you are a person who does like spiritual healing in this lifetime, the chances that you were doing it in the past and not being paid properly for it, or doing it in the past and like were able to do it without having to kind of engage with money and capitalism and all of that, like the relationship between healing and money has changed. And so if you have a past life as a healer, this will probably come up a lot for you as you are trying to like have a business and be a healer in this life. I also see it a lot with like ancestral wounds, and that's where like my clients will get it a lot, is if your ancestors were in a situation where they were really kind of, especially if it's like you have an immigrant background and your family like left your whole life behind to be in the US and to have to really, really struggle for money. And they did have to make a choice between what they loved the most and feeling like they had financial security. Then that really comes through for people in this generation, even if it's something that happened really deeply in the past.
Yeah. And just to go back on something that we kind of flew by quickly, but people today, I will say in our capitalist experience that we're all part of, we just don't breathe, right? So maybe talk a little bit about why and what conscious breathing actually does for our bodies and why it's so important to bring that in as part of a spiritual practice.
Yeah, so the thing I love about the breath is that it is like one of the few functions of our body that is both like completely unregulated. Like we don't need to be watching over it all the time in order for it to happen. It's like digestion in that way, or like your heartbeat. But we can regulate it if we choose. Like we can't regulate digestion. I guess we kind of could. But with breathing, we can very easily regulate our breath, but we also could choose not to. And if we choose to never regulate our breath, I mean, there's so much that I could go into, because I could go into like prana, the concept of prana, and it being like a lot of traditions believe that the breath is the thing that connects you to your infinite self in general, like the even thinking about like Jesus or God, whatever, breathing the breath of life into Adam. Like we have a lot of stories in history of the breath being the connection that like actually animates a person and gives a person life. And so consciously taking control of your breath, by extension for me, has really been consciously taking control of your life, like consciously taking control of that which put you on the planet in the first place, that which connects you to your purpose and connects you to divine. And going through life with like no inclination to actually control that is what leads people to kind of live their life. For me, at least, what led me to feel like I was living on a hamster wheel or on a conveyor belt with no kind of control or direction. And when I started to actively breathe, it's when I feel like I started to actively live.
Mm.
Wow.
So
that's a quote. I love that.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Really important.
I am going to chew on that for a long time.
We do take it for granted. And this pranic life force energy, right? The breath that comes in and out, it's also a way for us to be in connection with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who hasn't, at least, you know, you can take Samara's course for sure. Just Google a breathing exercise, see what it does for you. There's actually, if you want the natural high, breath work, no drugs needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's oxygen. It's so good. And also, I think during this time, just making sure that we are out in nature and breathing fresh, beautiful oxygen into our bodies is just important for everyone right now. So thank you for explaining that and talking
it's
through.
wild how many times per day I will just stop and realize like I've kind of been holding my breath for I don't know how long, and I should just stop for a minute and try to take some deep breaths.
Yeah. And like a practice I actually recently gave to a client, just like not even a breathwork practice, but just the client was feeling like their life was kind of like moving really fast and they needed to recalibrate to like the speed of everything that was going on. And we just explored the idea of like in between tasks, take like 1 or 2 deep breaths, like deep intentional breaths in between tasks to just remind yourself like, I can choose to have agency in this situation. Like this could just be happening on autopilot, but I'm going to choose to be in control or active right now, and then like go back to whatever it is that you're doing.
I love that idea of taking the agency. So much of what you talk about, you reframe it in this amazing way that it just feels so empowering. It's so cool.
That's a perfect word. You're helping people connect to their empowered higher selves
through something as easy as breathing. Like it's, yeah, we all have access to that, right? So,
and it doesn't take special training either. I think that's the part that gets me, is like it's so simple, so easy, and so accessible, but I don't use it like I should. I don't think I know anybody really who uses it to its full capacity.
Yeah.
So I have a question that is, it's an extension of the work you're doing. And also it's more of just as a Caucasian white person, Samara, can you help me just how can I be more in tune and aware and open in the work that I'm doing or just in my own life to be able to support queer people of color or anyone that is at least more in this minority identification? Because honestly, there are times when I don't know what to say. I don't know what I need to educate myself on. And for anyone out there listening that may align with where I'm at, please help me. Give me just a couple of things that you would recommend, or at least just open me up to where I can do better.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So 2 things come to mind. And the first one is basically what you're doing, but thinking about how it can be broader, like the idea of like having humility, recognizing when you need to like ask questions and when you don't have all the answers. But the other side to that is being willing to like show up imperfectly, being willing to say the wrong thing, and like trusting, and if trusting that there are people who will like gently guide you as you do the wrong thing, because the wrong thing will happen. I think there's a lot of like well-meaning people who like do harm unintentionally. And even just in your spiritual practice, like asking the universe to send you the people along your path who will guide you gently, guide you in the way that is the most kind of nourishing for your soul. Because if you're not being guided in a way that's nourishing, like you will reject the guidance. And so just like finding ways to trust that the universe will put people in your path that are going to guide you, but not letting that be the reason you don't start trying to do things now. So kind of creating that feedback loop. And then the other thing, which I, again, like worked on this with one of my most recent clients, because I have a service called like Anti-Oppression Tarot. And so it's like specifically for people who are in this situation where they're trying to like become more justice oriented and they would like someone who has a spiritual connection to guide them in that. And we talked about the idea of oppression being a web, and really thinking about like there are so many issues in the world. There are so many reasons that people are marginalized, and trying to sit with yourself and find the commonalities between the different reasons that people are marginalized, rather than feeling overwhelmed about like, well, there's queer people and then there's people who are differently abled, and then there are people who are people of color, and like it's too much to keep track of. Like sitting and asking to be shown where there's like a general through line of like having more compassion for people in general, and seeing how that permeates in the way that you are inclined to kind of act or not act on behalf of different groups.
Yeah, thank you. And I think at the core of that message, it's really love. right?
Mm.
Always being tuned into what we all need to put more of out there, and it's just love.
Especially that first part about being okay when you're wrong about something, like just like go easy on yourself too. Like it's okay to be wrong. You're wrong about lots of stuff all the time. So why not with, these issues as well? Just get over yourself basically.
Yeah, because at this point it's like saying nothing is a lot worse. Like saying and doing nothing is perpetuating a lot more harm than saying and doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That is so helpful. So helpful.
I'm glad.
Well, that's all my questions. What about you gals?
I guess maybe just what does, we're in the now. We only have this moment. And I'm sure you've got a few things coming up, future that you might be excited about. Where can, our listeners just either, obviously we want everyone to follow you and subscribe and keep in touch, but are there some projects that if you can talk about them, or maybe just themes that are starting to spark interest for you that you plan to take hold of over the next few months?
Ooh, okay. Well, I have been more intentional about giving less detailed insight about the future because I change so frequently. But something that is lighting me up right now is thinking about how people who have businesses, like spiritual businesses, can incorporate these like more justice oriented themes into the ways in which they do their spiritual practice and offer it to the world. So I don't know how that's going to look, but a lot of people have been reaching out to me about like having a business or wanting to have a business, but wanting to do it in like an anti-capitalist way, or wanting to do it in a way that like is justice oriented and be part of those conversations. So I think next year is going to be the year that I think about how to fold that in for sure.
I think you will.
That's awesome.
It's needed.
Samara, you have a ton of free resources on that links page. I mean, you definitely have classes and stuff that people should, at least consider signing up for. But if you want to get a little taste of what's on offer, sign up for the Ditch the Tarot guidebook course, because I got so much out of that. I've been reading tarot for like about 2 years and a bit now, and I'm no master or anything, but I got stuff from this. Like it's not just for beginners or anything. I definitely got a lot out of that. So I would recommend that for sure. And yeah, there's a ton of other resources there. Is there anything you want to in particular shout out from that list of links, or
what will be kind of available once this is out? I recommend Ditch the Tarot guidebook for sure. And also the resource that you were talking about, Jazz, it's called the Anti-Capitalist Money Challenge. It's also free. And every day for 3 days, you get different journaling exercises that help you think about the ways in which capitalism is impacting you personally, and then work through like one of those instances and figure out how you could reframe it and look at that situation differently.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful for you. And like I said, it's completely free. And yeah, by signing up for either of those things, you get onto my newsletter, which is just like all the weekly love, weekly journal prompts, and just like my personal reflections, I guess, about how I'm grappling with oppression and spirituality and all the things. So that's a good place to get started if you're new.
Awesome. And I keep referencing your Instagram page, but what is your actual handle?
So my handle is called Kasai Thrive, Kasai, and then the word thrive, no underscores or anything.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes anyway, so people have easy access to it. Yeah. Well, oh my gosh. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for reaching out to us. Just what an amazing sign from the universe. This has been such an insightful conversation. You are so intelligent. I learned so much, and I'm just so grateful that you would share it with us.
I will echo that 1,000%, and just want to encourage everyone to sign up and follow and stay engaged. There's much magic to be created in the future for you, Samara, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It's not always easy, but you are stepping into your purpose, which will then just open up so many more opportunities for you to touch lives. You're creating change in the world, and I am grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, follow Samara on Instagram, please, because every time they post anything, it'll make you sit and think.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love brain candy like that. And it's almost like Samara's rewiring my brain, the way I think about, money and oppression, even gender fluidity. Like, I mean, of course, I'm an ally, but it's so important that we hear the voices of people in that community. And Samara has this way of expressing it that's just easy to digest, easy to understand. So please, please, please follow.
Oh, thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been beautiful, and it's felt so natural, even though it's been like over an hour. I feel like I've just could talk to you all forever. So thank you for being such beautiful hosts.
Oh my gosh.
You're officially in the Coven.
Yeah.
So
welcome.
Yes, welcome to the world.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have you back one day, or we'll do some kind of, this conversation I'm sure will continue at some point.
Yes. Collaborations to come.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you at our next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tarot Coven Cast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be diving into our journey through the suits of the tarot. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.